Okay, so this is AI Interior. You can see the little play on words there. And it is an app that will generate interior design suggestions for rooms inside your house just from some pictures. So yeah, I came up with this idea because interior design is one of my interests. I have an affinity for comfortable and personal spaces, but I often feel uncertain in practical design and application in my home. Like it feels like there's so many possibilities for where it could go with, a design, and there's so much inspiration out there. And a lot of it's overwhelming. So it feels like I don't really know where to start. So I thought it would be convenient to have an app that could brainstorm many ideas for me and visualize these ideas. I thought AI would be a perfect use to leverage here. So initially, this is my product definition. An app that recommends interior design configurations for your room by uploading photos of each wall of the room, and I thought it would be, excessive to really understand the full 3D layout of the room and the room dimensions. So large physical objects that were in the picture would just be, considered part of the wall and would be understood as such in 2D. So, it's not really like a full like architectural design app, but more of just photo inspiration. And then obviously it will accommodate to your wants, requirements, and responses as a human-centered AI application would, and help you find products on the internet that you can use. So first, I did a run of literature review and user stories. I used ChatGPT 4o to perform a preliminary. First, I did a user stories with deep research, and then I did a literature review following that. And the deep research for the user stories prompted me to think about some important details for the app. This was actually helpful in my design process because it helped me think about the structure I desired. So here are the questions on the right here that ChatGPT asked me before performing the deep research. And I had to think about these questions and use them in my product definition. So I found the user stories to be quite effective, but even though I learned some critical information from the literature review, I felt like it was lacking. Um, so I wanted to search for among other models to make sure I was using the most up-to-date approach because I've been using ChatGPT for a while, like habitually. But I realized I hadn't really yet expanded my horizons to other models and explored other ones and see if they're better. So here are examples of when I was doing literature review and user persona using ChatGPT 4o. So yeah, I did some research on the best models here. There's actually a website right here. And you can see a leaderboard of all the models. And right now the leading is O3 Pro, but you have to pay a subscription for ChatGPT Pro to use that. And the next best is Chat or Gemini 2.5 Pro, and slightly lower down is Gemini 2.5 Flash with an intelligence index at 65. And I had been using GPT-4, I guess it was 4.1 or 4.0, one of them. But where's 4.0? Oh wow, that's really low. 41. And 4.1 is 53, but that's much below the Gemini 2.5 Pro. So this is just evidence that obviously AI models are constantly evolving, and it's important to be up to date on the right one. Yeah. So this was a process for me to ensure uh, I had been using, an effective workflow with my AI agents. And I started logging my prompts here. I would draft them on Notion before I would pass them to the models, and I learned more about prompt engineering as I was doing these literature review and user stories. So I reran them next in Gemini, and after some experimentation, I decided that I thought it made more sense to run the literature review first for the deep research because you can only use one deep research task per session in Gemini 2.5 Flash. Um, yeah, so I thought it made more sense to spend the deep research on the literature review. And I wanted to, however, use the user stories to help guide the literature review. That was important, and I think that's why the structure was that way beforehand. But to compensate for that, I took some of the information I gleaned from the user stories and put that as part of my literature review prompt. So here's my literature review prompt, which is very long. But I use some of these, structuring techniques that I touched on earlier. Um, so there's context, like information for the app I want. This is the core prompt. I use criteria for reputable journals, use recent sources, and this is all this info I've gathered from my previous user stories research, question answering, brainstorming, synthesizing the user stories that the previous models had generated, and I came up with this info. And so this is my literature review. It's pretty long. Um, so this is what uh, Gemini gave me, and I made sure to reflect on literature review here with some of my personal experiences, just to add into the paper. And it uses APA sources citations. Um, yeah, so some critical features I got from this review include whoa, user customizability, fostering control and personalization. So control, personalization, and transparency are three of the main characteristics of good human-centered AI applications. So some of these I already had, but searching from store catalogs, customizable budget, iterative design, so being able to respond to uh, the generated suggestions of interior design, so you can have extra control. Yeah, just making sure the model can go back and modify those things. And then, open source code and feedback on model progress help with transparency and understand what the AI is doing. Here's my user stories document. This one is much shorter. That's because it did not come from a deep research, but I think the conciseness of the user stories is actually helpful here. Yeah, so these are some of the features as told by fictional users. Um, and helpful. This is helpful for understanding like the human perspective in the goal of the application. Yeah, so this is the prompt I use, much shorter for the user stories than the literature review, but that's partly because it could reflect on this entire literature review I had previously generated. So next, I created wireframes using my iPad, and I drafted ideas for how I thought the app may look. Um, so here, some information for customizability you can put into the app. And then based on where you are, it will here the images it would be generating in response to the information here. And then you can view the products as shown in the picture. Um, so the the wireframes did end up inspiring the final product. I provide these wireframes to Gemini as a was designed app. Um, and yeah, that helped guide it. And some of the accessibility features in this app include a streamlined and linear interface. Right, so the app, I ended up with a scrolling design, even though this is maybe a design I would like to use if I would deploy it to an actual app in the App Store. But the scrolling design actually helped with the accessibility because it was so streamlined, linear, and the buttons were, not buttons on um, a spatial uh, structure on the screen, but just buttons like in a list and inputs in a list. Obviously, you can have spatial buttons on a screen still be accessible with a voice reader and such. It's a little bit harder. Um, and then I avoided using any color and visual specific elements. So that ensures that the app works with all types of color blindness. So next, because as outlined in the literature review and as I intuited with um, the complex design of an interior design suggestion app, I would need a more complex model architecture than uh just OpenAI, ChatGPT, or the Gemini model. Even like Dolly wouldn't suffice in this situation because it's difficult to have, especially with the ChatGPT Stable Diffusion, an accurate image of what your room looks like and adding objects in without it just like getting all messy and disoriented and futuristic. The Yeah, the Dolly tends to do that. It's not very accurate and realistic. So I thought I would need a more complicated pipeline architecture for that. So I had Gemini perform some research on how to structure these models, and it found ideas using ControlNet in YOLO V8, which was listed in the literature review. So this is the model architecture pipeline. So first, the image and the configuration, which is provided by the user, is sent to the YOLO V8 object detection. So it will list some of the objects it sees in the room, and that as long as well as the image and configuration is passed to Gemini. And with that information, it will determine object placement for some of the new objects in the room. And then all of this, so the image and configuration, as well as the Gemini natural language processing, is fed into ControlNet. So ControlNet is now not actually figuring out the interior design configuration because it's easier to offload the jobs over here. But ControlNet is just generating an image based on off the generated object placement from Gemini and its understanding of the objects in the room and the configuration provided by the user. Um, so yeah, and so the next step was to develop that. Um, so first I had Gemini synthesize a functional spec in Markdown from the user stories and the literature review. And I started by having it only generate the core logic, not the full app. But I ended up iterating a couple times to get the full app as it is now. So yeah, then I reviewed the functional spec, or I reviewed the functional spec, and I prompted Gemini to develop a draft code of the app, as you can see with these two prompts here. And the development process was a bumpy road. The first draft just did not work. There are many errors here. You can see on the bottom right corner. I had to I had to make a bunch of manual fixes to the code. Like it used the wrong byte array instead of image. It completely messed up the syntax of uh just a dimension, which was bizarre. I mean, I guess even AI can make mistakes, but when there's like 700 lines of code, I guess it's inevitable. It's making a lot less mistakes than I would, etc. Um, and even when I got through all of the uh, rigorous uh, formalities of the app, it didn't um, still function. It first, well, the first iteration was trying to use was to run the ControlNet model on my Mac, and it did not have enough memory for that. So next I tried to run it on my desktop, which had a GTX 1060, which is not a great GPU, but it's not terrible. I was hoping that maybe the AI would be able to run on that, but the model was having trouble. So yeah, for many reasons it was having trouble. There's some parallelism and uh, package issues. But not only that, once I got those worked out, it still, I don't think I had enough memory. I got some error like 2,000 gigabytes allocated failed. And Obviously, I don't think the model actually used 2,000 gigabytes, but I think that was a hallmark of just it not having enough memory and just airing out. Um, so yeah, my next step was to offload the control net, not the YOLO. The YOLO worked out just fine on my own GPU, but control net, and I had to use a web API, so I had to pay like 50 cents for all these generations, like all 200 or whatever of my tests for this product. So pretty cheap. But yeah, you can see here, this is like the dashboard on Replicate for many of my run throughs of image generation on the app. And here on the right, this is some of the JSON information in the prompt. You can't even see the whole thing. Yeah. So I'm now using the Replicate API instead of my own GPU for the control net. So finally, I had to fix some errors, including some Gemini's errors with integration of the model pipeline. And then I tuned all the model parameters. So I actually have stuff to say about that. Um, so I learned some of these parameters, and these are the crucial ones for the control net. And it was fun tuning them and watching all the different types of images come out. So scale here, this guidance scale. Guidance scale in machine learning or specifically natural language processing, is a very common parameter used to explain how strictly the model will adhere to the prompt. So lower values invite creativity, and higher values make it more rigid, sticking to the prompt. One funny thing I actually found on some online forums about guidance scale was that you can use negative values for guidance scale in a lot of models, and it will just give you like the opposite of what you prompted. Like one user online said something about uh like he was generating like a dog, like a ginger fur colored dog, and he used a negative guidance scale value, and it outputted like a blue car, which I think is hilarious. So then there are negative prompts. So these are things to avoid in generation. So like these, everything from low res on, I found this on a recommended negative prompts to use. And I was having some issues with my generation, creating far too significant changes to the image. So I added significant changes to the beginning of this prompt, and it helped a little bit. Um, and there's the model type. Two of the ones I experimented with was Seg and Scribble. So these are both types of segmentation masks, I suppose. But Scribble is more of a uh, heuristic segmentation mask using sketches and line drawings. And then there's DDIM steps, also on some models called like num generation steps. Um, and these are the amount of iterations that the model runs its diffusion algorithm. Okay, so now I'm going to do a demonstration of the app. Here I'm going to demonstrate usage of my app right here on my iPad. So first it's gonna ask me to upload my room wall photos. So you can upload multiple, but here I'm just gonna upload one. I'm gonna upload this picture of an empty room so we can fully design it. And the type of room here, I'm gonna select office. Um, because I think this would be a good office room. And I would like to do a full overhaul, so full renovation on this room. I'll choose, let's do coastal desired interior style. And for color palette, I think I would like neutral colors with, let's do, um, yeah, beach vibes. and we'll use natural wood for our material preferences. We can choose the items, I mean, sorry, the shops to buy products from, and for the prompt, not more plants. Let's add some plants, and let's see what it comes up with. So first, the wild LO model loaded successfully and detected 0 objects on the wall. And next, it is sending a request to replicate for the image generation. Okay, so as you can see here, the model finally loaded, and we got an interior design recommendation for our room. And I think it looks pretty good. We have wood on the back wall, which is obviously not really possible. I mean, you could paint wood or use a wallpaper, but that's okay. And then a simple minimalist office space here in the middle. The desk is a little bit incoherent, but it gets the idea across. We have a white desk with some metal rods, and we have blue paint on the right here and some cabinets on the left here. And I like this configuration and the rug on the bottom. And yeah, it shows the items here. Oh, it is the Linman desk from IKEA. Um, and yeah, so this we can generate more suggestions. Um, One thing about uh the replicate API control net model, there's a limitation for this draft of this app. It could be fixed in the future, and I do hope to fix in the future. But the model I'm using, the control net model, is cold on replicate API right now, which means that every time I would like to use the model, it has to take a while to boot, which is kind of problematic because even though the image generation only takes a few seconds, every time it's requested, the model has to boot back up again. Throughout this project, I learned a lot about the capabilities of AI and research, which I thought was actually very helpful, learning about how to perform literature reviews and user stories for apps and similar research techniques. AI can be really helpful with that. You don't need a human to do it, which opened my mind to more of the possibilities of AI. I learned about prompt engineering, and I gained experience in developing and specifically a human-centered AI app start to finish, which was really fun. Um, and in the future, I would add a better product catalog and search feature. Because right now the model used a mock catalog. It said it would be very complex to find APIs for all the different stores like IKEA, Target, Amazon, and reveal the real products. So right now it's using a mock catalog. So in the future, I would add a real one. Then I would, of course, refine the model structure and parameters, tune it, probably improve the model structure because even though it's yielding somewhat good results, it's also sometimes a little bit messy, as I initially tried to avoid. Turns out image generation is just a really tough task. And then I would implement saving old sessions, which was outside the scope of developing the draft for this project, and I would deploy it into an iPhone app. So thank you.